Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Talking Education. This is our third time of meeting and talking about whatever is most current and relevant to education today, and looking at reports which have come out over the past week or so. I'm delighted to introduce our panelists today. We've got Sharifah Lee, we've got Tracey Bowen, and we've got Andrew Bernie Bernard, who's going to be known as Bernie, as he is on Twitter, who are our panelists today. And the format is that we're going to allow each of the panelists to have some time to share their reflections and to introduce themselves, of course. And then after that, we will have a general panel discussion, and they will then summarize their closing thoughts. And then we're going to open the discussion out to everyone who's with us in the room today, because I think it's one of the bits of feedback that we've had from previous Talking Ed discussions is that members of the people who are attending this, members of the audience, I want to say, would really want to have their voices heard and to take part in the discussion. And I think that's incredibly important. I'm going to remind you all that we are recording this and it will be available on YouTube. So if you do speak, I would prefer you to allow yourself to be identified so that everyone knows who you are and what your context is. Okay, so in his absence, Sharifah and Tracey made the very wise decision to allow Bernie to go first tonight. And what we're going to be talking about is a report which has just come out. It was a poll that was carried out by the NEU in preparation for their annual conference, which happened, was about to happen. Oh, it's just happened, I think. And what they found was that 44% of teachers want to leave education. So 22% would like to leave within the next 2 years. And then a further 35% would like to leave with by 2027. And I feel very sad about that. I feel very distressed about it because I choose to work in education because I absolutely love education. I have a passion that has been with me for all of my life. And I can't imagine ever not having that passion. And the fact that amazing people feel ousted, not because they don't share my passion, but because the system is letting them down so badly, absolutely breaks my heart. So that's what I'm going to say for now. I'll probably chip in with some other thoughts later on. But what I'd really like to do now is starting with Bernie to hear your thoughts in response to this poll and just your observations and your recommendations, really. Bernie.
Well, I don't know about recommendations, but thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. It's a really lovely panel to be part of. My name's, everyone calls me Bernie. My name's Andrew Bernard. I've worked in education for 17 years, starting after I realised that I'd been doing the wrong job for 17 years and that I really needed to be the person I needed when I was younger, which was someone who was totally distracted, not focused, and didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I'm all about careers, I'm all about enterprise with young people, and I also do talks on testicular cancer and domestic violence and healthy relationships in schools. So I've worked with schools, not necessarily in schools, for 17 years. And I've seen massive changes in that time. And I'm really saddened by this report, but also I'm not remotely surprised. I'm delighted to say that my daughter has gone into primary teaching. She's 28 and she's in her 6th year of teaching now. She's the Senko lead. She also has dyslexia. She's pushed herself to be able to support young people in the primary setting, and she's been through massive amounts of changes. The number of head teachers she's had in 6 years has been crazy. She has colleagues changing all the time, and I think it's a really difficult time, and I think that there's a number of reasons for that. And one, in that report, it says 2/3 of teachers say they're stressed 60% of the time. Our body cannot cope with that level of cortisol being produced all the time. Where do we then leave time for our own families and our own children if we're really stressed out worrying about year 11 or the behavior in year 8 or whatever it is you're worrying about this week? Allied to that, we've just had the pandemic, and I think a lot of people thought schools were closed because that was some of the narrative. You know, schools are not open. Well, they are, or every school was open. Every teacher that I know worked harder. In fact, they were so stressed out. I remember a tweet from a woman that works at the school that both my daughters went to, and she said, the disheartening feeling of teaching 4 hours to a blank screen with not a single comment coming back. And this is A-level English. So these students have chosen this subject. That must be really stressful. Add to that being used as a political football, all of the, the 11 o'clock on Sunday night new guidance on what's going to happen with COVID restrictions, protections, ameliorations, with lack of PPE, with lack of support. And then all of a sudden, when things are tailing off, tons and tons of PPE arriving. It just, I cannot understand in a way why anyone would want to be part of the teacher community, except for what Alison said earlier. It's the passion, it's the reason we're here, is to support young people. Unfortunately, the structure around it, the way that we are seen by the public largely, which is tapped into by lots of the right-wing press about lazy teachers sitting on their backsides, just playing on Zoom all day. I think it's another culture war, isn't it? And I think it's horrific that someone so key to the development of young people and society generally, like people who work in the NHS, like people who work in the forces, they're very often thrown under a bus. And instead of being, I'm not saying venerated, but let's say, respected and supported for the fact that teachers teach everybody. Let's just think about that for a time. Their role is key. If you've got an upset child, a child that hates going to school, one kind word from one teacher can change their life. So I was thinking about this and how teaching is seen in other places in the world. Lucy Crean's book, Cleverlands, was fascinating. And when you put it into context with Gove a few years ago, saying, yes, we're going to take the best bits of the Finnish model and we're going to bring it into our primary schools. Great. But in order to do that, you need a profession that is trained at master's level. You need a profession that is valued in the same way as doctors are valued, so that we can then incorporate some of the great tools that are working in Finland and help them to work in our situation. We don't have that luxury. We don't have that support. We don't have that kind of veneration in our society of teachers. We don't have that value of the professionalism of teachers. And that's something that it doesn't surprise me, this report, I have to say. It saddens me greatly, but it doesn't surprise me. Throughout the stress of everything that's been happening in the last couple of years, I was with a head teacher today in Cambridgeshire who became a head the Christmas before lockdown. And she said she had a really hell of a time, but she's very bright about her future, about the concept of being a head teacher and having been through what she claims will be the worst period of her educational life. And she's come out unscathed, but some of the students have come out with real issues, and they're an isolated pocket of her school population. But she said she could only imagine what it must be like when you've got a population of kids which don't gel very well, under massive amounts of stress, when you've got the cost of living crisis. It's going to have long-term effects. And if you look at COVID as a kind of acute trauma, which a lot of people are talking about it being, we're not going to find what the real impacts of it are for 5 years, 10 years. It's going to be a really long term. And teachers were the people that held that together within schools. I'm just going to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One, something Noam Chomsky said: in order to privatize a service and bring in the private sector, you run it down until it doesn't work. You run it down until it doesn't work, and then the only solution is to bring in the private sector. And I'm wondering if, academization is what's happening there. I think that, you know, and I think we've got a social mobility czar that seems to think it's about making it worse. I'm not really sure what the role of someone like that is, but I don't think the things that she's saying is helping the profession, A, to be elevated to in status, or B, actually changing social mobility within the UK. And the other thing I would say is, if you're a head teacher, I don't know how they are coping by being that umbrella that keeps all the stuff that's coming down onto them away from their staff. And, you know, every single sector of education is squeezed, but I think head teachers and SLTs are under so much pressure at the moment, and we really need to look after their well-being, because if their well-being is knackered, then everybody else below them is knackered, because they're going to be delegating. And if they, you know, if they're not delegating effectively, if they're delegating from stress, then everyone's getting work at 11 o'clock at night, which no one needs. We need to kind of look at that work-life balance and not just give them a well-being day. We actually need to think about what is it that's causing all that stress, and how can we help head teachers to help those teachers to retain that, because the cost, the disruption, the cultural shift that goes on in schools, if they've got a 25% turnover of staff every year, or a 10% turnover of staff even, it's immense. So I hope that's what you were looking for. That's just my thoughts on it, my angry, ranty, slightly frustrated thoughts. I hope there's a little bit of hope in there, though. But that's
Bernie. I thought that was excellent, and thank you for being courageous enough to go first and to share your thoughts. And I have to say, I agreed with everything you had to, you know, there wasn't anything that was contentious there for me. We're going to go to Tracey Bowen next. Tracey, it's your turn.
Evening, everyone. I'm Tracey Bowen. I'm a head teacher, you're going to boo, of a free school, of a multi-academy trust. So I know there's some people anti that. And we're based in Berkshire, a small multi-academy trust, just striving to make a difference. I've been teaching, I don't know, 20-something years. I know I don't know old enough. But it's really sad to read this report. And sometimes it's just almost, it felt a bit like Groundhog Day. We have these negative reports that come out time and time and time again, just showing how bad life is for teachers, but nothing's ever done about it. And I think that there's much we can do to try and take control. COVID has had an insane impact on all of our lives, and there's the real frustration in school. And I think school leaders are working under external pressures, accountability measures, the DFE, or testing agency, when they sent their email through in March about SAT, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're about to cancel it. We know how tough COVID has been, and that's why, ellipses, we're going to think it's important that we test children this year so we can see where the gaps are. When people are working under these extreme accountability measures, you're having to really filter out the noise. And I just feel there is so much pressure coming in. So you've got teachers, there's not one teacher on the planet who wants to do a bad job. Everybody wants to do what is right for the children in their class. And that takes an insane amount of time. And it takes a double insane amount of time when we're working under the pressures that we have been since COVID. No disrespect to some parents, but there's a real unreasonable nature of parents. I think we're beyond the gratitude that there was when schools reopened. And, you know, why aren't you doing this for my child? Why isn't this happening? And there's just pressure and pressure. It just feels like a hurdle after another hurdle after another. And this is having a huge impact. And it's sad that we've got to this outcome now. But also what makes it even worse is, dare I say, a government that doesn't really want to take decisive action or make the loud positive noises to make a difference. From when they're saying there's no recruitment crisis, there's no retention crisis, and we're going to give all new recruits £30,000, whoopee-doo, everything's sorted. They're so divorced from reality. And I think that's the pressures that are starting to get to people. As Bernie said, work-life balance. I've got young teachers who are just saying, Tracey, I don't know how you've done it for all of these years. And if there's one job in this world I wouldn't do, it's headship. Well, you can't run a profession that way, where people don't want to be climbing up the ladder. And so that there's just so much we need to do to change. And as a school leader, I think it's about trying to create a culture whereby I can help and give a bit of oxygen to those who need it, because I can't do my job without teachers and support staff within it. So there are the schools, obviously, if you look at, Bernie mentioned sort of the well-being days, a duvet day, have your one day off a year. I don't know that that really makes sort of significant difference, but we do have to look at how we're encouraging our staff to work, how we're employing situations for working smarter. I know teachers have emails on their phones, for argument's sake. So I come home and I might draft a ton of emails, but they're sit out waiting to be sent until the morning, because you don't want that ping that's going off. We talk about children and screen time and not having screen time before bed, but we don't do that and model for that us as a profession. And as adults, yes, there's an element of I work when it's convenient for me, but I think it's really important that we start really putting in some lines in the absence of anybody external that wants to do it, to say, in order for me to survive, this is my time, this is what I'm not doing, here is when I am going to give myself that time to recharge. I know there was sort of, I think a few years ago on the teacher's toolkit, it was sort of like a 5-minute well-being activity that staff should do and try and measure it, you know, so they got some downtime. Although you do wonder, is that all we can give ourselves, 5 minutes in order to make ourselves feel better? So I think we really need to look at some sustainable approaches, rising mental health. So many teachers that I know that are suffering anxiety and stress, whether that's work related, whether that's in personal lives, there comes a point where this just can't continue. And how open are we to being able to share? Have we got the right climates, the right cultures in our school where we can share and listen to these issues so that we're able to retain our staff? I cannot begin to think of a world without teachers. That doesn't even make sense. How are we getting our next generation? How are we showing people that here, you know, there's a world for you to go and achieve, you know, the world is your oyster. We can't keep getting rid or making our teachers, anybody in the profession at whatever level you are, whether it's M1, whether it's UPS or beyond that they just can't keep going anymore. So I'm going to keep living on this utopian dream. I do think that there's a way out of this. I think it's going to take a lot of communication. And as a head teacher, I think I've got to have those broad shoulders just to prop people up and say, come on, you know, we can get through this. It's a turbulent time. This is a bit post-war Britain without us having the strong leadership to really pull us together and show that we can get through on the other side. So I think our main thing is looking at workload. How do we tackle that workload? How are we taking control of the accountability measures? Don't let Ofsted be your driver. Do what's right for your school. And if you're doing the right thing for your school, you will get the right Ofsted outcome. Don't, you know, it's not cart before the horse. And I think those are the sorts of things that we can help just to lift pressures off. So there we go. Those are my few insights, Alison.
Fantastic. I knew you'd be brilliant, Tracey, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts there. And we're now going to hear from Sharifah.
Hi, I am just so pleased to be here because I can see some faces and names that I know, but the main thing that I wanted to say before, you know, even start the 5 minutes that I have is there is so much right and so much good in education. The reason why I know that is because all of us are here. You know, that passion that Alison talked about is right here, right now. You know, it's bottled up in pockets of isolation. What it needs to do is get connected. And something else as well, unless we robotized, you know, sort of human beings. There will always be, so I'm going to disagree slightly with Tracey here. There will always be teachers. There will always be, because the outcome will be that we will always need people out there to do different jobs. It's about the quality of the teachers, because I think that's where we're failing. Because just this morning as well, 44% of head teachers are thinking of leaving in the next 5 years. But before all of that, I am Sharifah. I'm sure a lot of you know me. I am currently the head teacher of a school in South Bucks, not far from Tracey, actually a couple of miles down the road. And this is why this world is so small and we are interconnected as well. And Tracey talked about having been in this profession for years and years and years. Well, years and years and years and years and years and years ago, she taught my children. And that's what, Alison, you're laughing. Is how do you know, Tracey? And this is why this profession is absolutely magic, and we are connected somehow. We will find each other. There'll be ways where we will find each other because we have the same values, and it's about that as well. And we're talking a lot this evening about short-term fixes, what we can do in our schools. But I think what is chronic is this lack of long-term vision, that education has become politicized. It cannot be that, but it has become that. I mean, you know, some of the derogatory terms that are being used about our profession, from the blob and woke. Well, I am woke, I am awake, because that's what education is about. It's about social justice. It has to be. It always has been. And my problem is, and I'm going to refer to Bernie in a moment as well, you know, because we are still so traditional in the way we look at education. We are not keeping up, let alone catching up with the developed world. And Bernie talked about respect for the profession, and that is a problem here. Tracey talked about parents now perhaps not showing the respect that perhaps used to be shown in that traditional Victorian model. Maybe, you know, teachers are key or God or whatever it is. But in other parts of the world, they are celebrated, they are acknowledged. My background is I come from Singapore. You know, there is also a reason why the, you know, sort of again, although I do not believe in league tables and PISA and whatever statistics there are, because we're talking about different cultures as well across the world. But there's a reason why the Singapore education system is really, really good, because the profession is really thought well about. So much investment is put into teaching and looking after teachers. And you know, a couple of my mother, who has retired as a teacher, she still lives in Singapore, she keeps asking me, why are you serving in this country here? Why don't you go back and serve? Because every 3 months teachers, and listen to this, get bonus. They get a bonus every 3 months, right? And it's not about the money, but it's about value. It's a different kind of value. But how do you show that value? And when the cost of living is rising, when we are stretched and we are overwhelmed, and the workload, even no matter how much we try and reduce it, there always will be workload. So how do we then show people that we value them? One way would be, you know, paying them the correct amount that they deserve, making sure that they are protected, making sure that our rights as teachers and professionals are protected. I mean, all of us are graduates as a minimum, right? Unless you're a qualified teacher working in certain organizations, we have gone through the system. Where is the acknowledgement that we have worked for this? And the people who leave, who are thinking of leaving, the people who stay until they retire, we believe in what we do, but there is a reason why some of us just cannot remain here any longer. And I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about, it's not just the workload, it's a feeling of being disillusioned, I think, and that is the word. Because again and again and again, it's the feeling of being trampled and not being listened to, not being consulted. Bernie talked about the last minute, you know, oh my goodness, guidance through COVID. That's madness. And I'm sure Tracey will say the same thing as well. Most head teachers and their senior leaders and teachers in school, we were actually actively working before the guidance. We knew what we were going to do in our schools before the guidance came out. And in fact, I ignored most of it because actually I had a plan already for my school and my children. And what I think teachers were not acknowledged for was, and I know this is my school and we are one formentary school, so it's quite a small school as well with very limited resources. And for those of you who do work in schools and understand of how funding works, oh my goodness, we are broke. And how do you run an organization that prepares children for the world when you do not have the money and resources to do it? We are doing it on a shoestring, and we do it so well. During COVID as well, when we had to prepare ourselves for the virtual platform, we did not have the resources, we did not really have the technology, we did not really have the knowledge, because of course, we weren't prepared for a pandemic. I mean, how many of us have ever lived through something like this before? And yet, my goodness me, we learned, didn't we? That steep learning curve, all the teachers in nearly every school in this country managed to get a virtual platform in whatever shape and form up and running for the communities and families we serve. But how can teachers and leaders serve communities that are so impoverished? When they reach our gates in the morning, the number of children who have not been fed, who lived in really crime. And Tracey will know this because both of us used to, well, she still does. I used to serve in Slough. And we actually served those communities. And I know I used to work in a school called Foxborough, which is not far from where Tracey is right now. And it was one of the most deprived wards in this country. And there were families in Slough. This is a developed country. We are only 19 miles from London, where a family of 7 are living in a 1-bedroom flat. How is that even possible? And yet they have to come to school. They've got to go through the same system, whether they live in poverty or whether they come from affluent backgrounds. The inequity, I think, causes disillusionment in the teaching profession. I think one of the reasons why you work so hard and yet you're not acknowledged, it's underfunded. You know, so what can we do? We can do what Tracey said we can do in our schools, really understanding our community, our teachers, what is it they need? Not yoga days, not more cakes in the staff room. My goodness me, I've put on so much weight, you know, in the last couple of weeks, just because it is the stress. For me, it is just overeating and whatever it is. But I think it is really about coming together and thinking, what is right for the community we serve? We need to define it, and then we need to have that joined up thinking, because this is the thing that is missing. Again, Tracey talked about the high stakes accountability. I'm sorry, I'm now on my high horse. You started this because, oh my goodness, we are, you know, all of us, we are driven, aren't we? We are driven to make a difference. And what a shame that some of us feel as if they cannot stay because there isn't that support and acknowledgement and system to almost protect us, so that we can do our jobs well. So, for example, SATs that's coming up, what a shocking thing to do to our young learners. And this is the message that I have given to teachers in my school, children in my school. We are not preparing for SATs. What are we even thinking about? We have prepared them for their education, their journey, and for this next step into the educational world. We know who they are and what they need. We are going to have one practice run because, my goodness me, they wouldn't know where to sit and what to do and what equipment to use. And that is all we're going to do. However, I know, and I'm not going to say exactly who they are, I know other schools who are really preparing their children for SATs. Those children in year 6 know exactly which secondary schools they're going to. What are we doing? Who is it for? So I think we need to flip the question. We need to think about vision in this country. What is it that we want out of education? Unfortunately, right now, our government doesn't empower, and I don't believe we have the right personnel to lead us there. So what can we do? We need to come together. A couple of years ago, I attended Head Teachers Roundtable. I was actually a deputy head, and I bought my own ticket because I wanted, and Alison will understand where I'm coming from, I wanted a chair at that table. If no one's going to invite me, I'll invite myself. And so I did, and I listened to some powerful words about collaboration. I listened to a lot of words where let's rip all the sticking plasters off, let's start again. This is an opportunity here. And when COVID happened, so many leaders nationally said, this is the opportunity. And what's happened now? Why are we back to square one? And that actually makes it worse. And I think that's where the disillusionment comes in again and again and again. And that's why we have got a number of teachers thinking of leaving, got a number of leaders thinking of leaving. There will be others to replace them because, like I said, unless we replace them with robots, somehow the government will find people to replace them. But it's not about quantity. It will always be about quality, because what is it that we want our children to be? Do we really want them to be replicas of the leaders we have today? I'm sure thank you, Bernie. I'm sure the answer is please, no, please, God, no more. No. So what is it that we need to do? We need to come together. Sorry, I live in hope. I always live in eternal hope. And as long as we have our voices and we can use it together, we can do this. And Tracey, I agree with you. We can do this. We have to do this. It is necessary we do this. You taught my children all those years ago, right? They are doing fine. You did a fabulous job. And that's what all of us are doing, and keep holding that. That's my, well, if it's a word of wisdom, I don't know. I'm not very wise. I am very passionate.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Sharifah. Wow, what a strong, amazing panel. You said different things, but they absolutely come together. So reading through the report and listening to the podcast that sat alongside the report, the reasons why people feel that they want to be leaving the profession is because teachers feel unheard, they feel undervalued, they feel unappreciated for who they are and for the work that they're doing. And fundamentally, there is a complete lack of trust. So undervalued can be seen in lots of different ways, can't it? Calling it somebody inadequate is inhuman. It's inhuman. And somehow or other, we've allowed ourselves to have some people branded in that kind of way. And that's deliberately provocative. But also when we talk about undervalue, it's about not having respect for the fact that teachers work long, hard hours with incredible passion and commitment because they want to serve every single child that they teach. We come to work to serve, not to take in any kind of way. And then instead of that being appreciated, it's taken for granted. Our family time, there is no question of, you've got a family to spend time with, you've got people you love, you need time for you need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to do all of the other things that other people take for granted, that teachers somehow have to fit in or often sacrifice. But there's this big thing about the fact that we in school for 195 days, we are in school 195 days of directed time. When you talk to any teacher about how many of their days of weekends they give up, how many days of their holidays they give up, and then you go to any other profession and say, do you give up 10 or 15 days of your holiday? And people would look at you as if, well, why would I give up 15 days of my holiday? But that's what teachers routinely do. Last day of the holidays, the first few days of the holidays, school is full of teachers doing all of the things that they don't have time to do in their normal workday, despite the fact that they're working for 60, 70 hours a week. There is the fact that we take it for granted that teachers have children of their own and might want to go and see things like their children in a nativity or sports day, which other people can just go and do, but we can't just do. So we have all of those sorts of difficulties. We also have problems with our well-being. I've noticed lately on Twitter, the number of people saying, my health is really struggling, I don't know what to do. People are talking out now. It's become a really, really critical problem. And I really worry about that. I make no secret of the fact that in 2014, I absolutely hit the wall. I had extraordinary results, very successful school, highly thought of, and all of those sorts of things. But I became incredibly unwell, and I know what it feels like to hit the wall. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It took a long time to recover. So stress is a really, really big problem. So we need to think about how we do this, how do we support each other, and all those sorts of things. I think the things that we need to put into place is we need to look at pay. Teachers can't afford to survive on the pay that they've been given. I was reading somewhere quite recently where someone is they're earning less money now than they did 6 years ago. The cafe that I go to most frequently for brunch at the weekends, The person who serves me most often is somebody who's in her first year of teaching. She has to work Saturdays because she can't afford to live on her teacher salary. That is not okay. We need to look at time, because the job can't be done in the time that's been given. And more people are being asked to take on positions of responsibility, but they aren't being given the time to do that. And we need to look at how teachers, what we can do about value. We need to think about giving voice. We need to learn how to show appreciation. We need to show recognition for the profession. We need to think as well about how to create an inclusive culture, because a lot of people feel completely marginalized and feel like they don't belong and all those sorts of things. And then mostly we need to talk about trust. How on earth are we going to learn to trust our teachers rather than the sloppy accountability that we've got through the collection of data, because that summarizes how people are doing. There's so much more that's going on in our schools. And we also need to look at how we portray deliberately by the government. It's provocative. You know, we only do so many hours of teaching. Do you remember the birthday party gate and all of that kind of stuff? That's what teachers do, drink in the staff room. I've never known teachers to hang out drinking in the staff room. So being marginalized and being portrayed in that way completely undermines the profession. So those are my thoughts in terms of what we need to do and what and it's my understanding about why people are leaving the profession. So I'm going to do things in reverse order. I'm going to ask Sharifah whether you can give us 2 or 3 strategies that you would like others to consider going forward so that we can rescue our profession, because we can't have all these people, wonderful people, leaving our schools.
I think absolutely. I think one thing as leaders and head teachers as well, and Bernie touched on that, you know, we are the umbrella, but we do need to protect, because if we're waiting for solutions out there, it's going to be quite a long wait, because right now, you know, funding is stretched, there's not enough out there, services for children are stretched and services for teachers themselves. And we talked about anxiety and mental health. I think as head teachers and leaders, you really need to understand the teachers who serve the children as well, and talk to them. What is it they need? Because each individual will need something different. I think what you said as well about the young teacher who has a second job, you know, are there teachers in our own schools that are going through such stresses, you know, financial hardship or emotional stress? I mean, it has been such difficult times. It was difficult before. My goodness, it's much more magnified. And I think we need to give clear messages to them as well. Communicate, but be clear. Also take away some of those stresses. One thing that we talked about in the chat group as well, things like SATs or phonics testing that's coming out, multiplication. This is just primary. And in secondary, it's very difficult for me, of course, to comment on secondary because I don't work in secondary, but it's based on the same principle. Ask your staff, what is it that I can do for you to help you be the best version of yourselves? And for everything that they do, is it needed? If it's not going to make an impact on learning, why are we doing it? But that needs inner strength. That needs a school with its own vision, understanding its aims and objectives. And I would encourage leaders out there, schools out there, but teachers as well. Make sure that you use that voice that Alison talks about as well, and make those conversations happen in your school. Because for some leaders who either they're inexperienced or they are stressed out themselves because the high accountability system, because our system has become quite toxic. Even head teachers work in silos. The ones that are here now, I mean, Tracey and myself and others who are in senior leadership team, because we are connected, because we have our networks, we feel stronger together. But I do know of so many schools who are working in isolation as well. So you teachers, you also need to use your voices. And I think where, in terms of mental health as well, and the things that schools can do, we also need to turn it around, because it's also about personal responsibility. However, what can schools do to enable you to take on that personal responsibility? I think communication is key. So those are some of my thoughts from where I come from anyway.
Thank you, Sharifah. And I absolutely agree with what you said, and it's incredibly wise. I'm going to go to Bernie, and then we're going to finish with Tracey just to mix things up a little bit. So Bernie, love to hear from you.
Okay, I just I'm going to echo what Sharifah's just said about head teachers. You said something absolutely brilliant when you were talking about COVID, that most of the stuff you were doing already when you were waiting for the guidance to drop in at 11 o'clock at night. That speaks to me about the culture of your school, about the culture of, we know what's right for our students, we know what's right for our staff, we lead by example, and if anything comes down from above that's going to change what we're doing dramatically, we'll do it. But we know what our values are, and that's how we work. That, you know, that Paul Dick says that the best places to work have a sign that says this is how we do it around here. And you know, and I think it's crucial to have that sense of culture, and that comes from the top. It also comes from recruitment, it also comes from training, it comes from diversity, it comes from having different voices than just old white men, because that's what you see so often, with beautiful exceptions here. That's what you see so often in leadership in schools. That's when, you know, and when you look at 26% of women get 26% lower pay at SLT, that's not surprising. But also there's a ceiling which is caused by all sorts of, you know, the third highest childcare payments in the world. So it's no wonder loads of women don't go back into teaching full time after they've got children, because it's unsustainable in many ways. So that's the first thing. So think about your culture. Honestly, really do think about diversity, because I think it's a massive gap happening in terms of the way we teach young people as well. If they don't see people like them teaching them, then there's a disconnect already. You help the culture of everyone in the place if everyone looks different, if we reflect the society that we have, but also that we aspire to have, by giving young people better role models. I'm just going to leave it there, because I think they're the two most important things that we could do. And culture is key, which again comes back to headship. And that's, I respect you massively, head teachers, because you have one of the most difficult and important jobs that we have in society generally. So good luck.
I can only agree with you. Yeah, because you are, I mean, you want to make yourself redundant. A good head teacher wants to make themselves redundant because they've led the community into being autonomous and amazing. So Tracey, we'd love to hear from you.
I totally agree with actually what Sharifah and Bernie has said, and I think our way out is to take control, and I'm going to use our dear Prime Minister's words, to get the job done. We know what needs to be done. It's definitely not the way that he's doing it. And Audrey mentioned that, you know, during COVID, everybody was saying at the end of this, it would be a happier, brighter place. We can take some kind of control to set that climate inside our own school. Go back to our values. What's our why? What's our purpose? Why are we here? And if it doesn't match your why, we need to have that power to throw it out. And nobody can do that on their own. That has to start with the support staff understanding the school why, and the support staff supporting the teachers supporting the SLT, governors, trustees, local authorities, everybody listening to understand what do we need. And then we've got to be honest and reflective. Is what we're doing helping our school community right now? And look slightly further afield. Is it helping our neighbours up the road? We have to stop being so egocentric and so selfish. There is so much selfishness going on at the moment that it just, as I say, the good that was coming out when we were clapping at 8 o'clock is kind of a bit buried away at the moment. So we really need to look at our why. What are our values? What are we going to do to make the difference so that, I'm going to say it again, we can get the job done? And I'm a great fan of Rita Pearson, you know, every child needs a champion, but every child needs a champion. We all need a champion. There's a child inside all of us that needs to be told that they're doing the best. I don't think it's doom and gloom. We need to make sure that we're holding on to that bright light called hope, because if we take on all of the negative energy that's coming to us, it will only drag us down too. And if I'm going to be totally honest, I think that there's money to be made in making everybody so demoralized that they want to quit, because who knows what you'll fill the void and the gap with. And I think Sharifah has also sort of said, you know, it's that quality over quantity. We want people that care. I don't want to be rude, but the social mobility czar has come up a fair few times. And there are a few people in positions of power that don't hold the values that we want to hold to make a just, better, brighter generation, so that, you know, we really pass that baton on. So I think it's about asking the right questions and being prepared to listen to those answers. And we have to really analyze what we are doing and find the strength in whatever group it may be, so that we can throw back the trash that we're not doing. I actually wish it was back to 2010 and everybody was going to boycott SATs this year. I was looking forward to it, but that didn't really appear to gather much traction. So, you know, we will all do as we're told. For what outcome, who knows? And it's the same with, you know, Sharifah was saying GCSEs, A levels, everything, you know, do what's important for us, so that when we are going to sleep with that brain chatter, we know that we're doing what is right to make us face tomorrow.
Thank you, Tracey. That's unbelievably incredible. You know, what the three panelists, what you said today is really spot on. It's meaningful, it's connected, it's real, it's honest. There's nothing to disagree with. And what I'd add to that is Bernie's statistic of the 26% pay gap in for senior leaders between men and women. We also need to remember that most of those women, and this is going to probably come across as being really sexist, but sometimes you just have to say what you see. So most of those women are not only being paid less, but most of them will have a second full-time caring role as well. Men don't always have that, but women often have another person at home that they are the primary carer for, which is a whole job in itself. So no wonder those people become extraordinarily stressed and underpaid and struggling and have low morale and all of those sorts of things. And then, of course, it's easy to laugh at women being angry women and so on. The other thing that I would really want to appeal to is to head teachers. Now, I'm not head teacher bashing. I did the job for 20 years. I absolutely love the job. I have incredible respect for head teachers. But I want head teachers to really question what it is they're asking of their staff and to be courageous. There are some head teachers who say, I know I'm asking too much of my staff, but if we don't do this and this and this and this, then we're going to get into trouble. And that is how the system is being allowed to become eroded, because we are defaulting into supporting a system that is anti-teacher, is anti-quality of life, you know, a decent lifestyle for our teachers. So if you ask somebody to do something, is it reasonable? And if it isn't reasonable, then go back to, you know, we've got governors, we've got people that we need to cascade these responsibilities up to, where you can say, actually, I don't want any of my teachers doing more than a 50-hour week. So what are we going to do so that doesn't happen? And that means that the problem has to go somewhere else. Yes, it will put head teachers under incredible pressure. I can feel it. I can feel myself getting scared because I know what that feels like. But we're colluding with it, and we need to find a way to not collude. And I think that Tracey and Bernie and Sharifah talked a bit about the need for collaboration. And I think that what happens is that schools are working in isolation because we're so busy working hard. There isn't time to collaborate and do all of those sorts of things. And then, of course, there's the whole thing around selfishness, as Tracey has said, you know, where you want to keep things closed. You don't want to share your best secrets, because if you do, you compromise your league table place and all of those sorts of things. So let's not let the league tables stop us from being good humans who want to share and support, because once we start coming together and collaborate and share our problems and do all of those sorts of things, then maybe we can find a way to not collude with a system that is so damaging for our profession, and we can maybe find power together so that we can overcome what is going on in our schools today. So those are just my closing thoughts. What I would really like to do now is to say an enormous official thank you to Sharifah and to Bernie and to Tracey. I think you have been excellent panelists. I'm so glad that you were here sharing your thoughts today. And what I'd like to do now is to open the discussion out to other people who've joined us so that we can hear their voices. And you're welcome to stay and engage, or if you've got other commitments, then I totally understand that. But I think it's important to hear the voices of other people who've chosen to join us today. And as Sharifah said, you are here because you are so committed. You have this passion for education. Otherwise, who else would stay up late on a Wednesday evening and talk about schools? So I'd suggest you just let me know that you want to share and you'd like to say something. Put your hand up, or you can just show yourself so that we can see you. And I'd love to hear your voices. And Sharifah and I want to say Andy, Bernie, and Tracey. This includes you. You're still part of the discussion. Your wisdom is profound, and I want to go on hearing it. So anybody? There's quite a lot of sharing going on. Audrey, you were there sharing away, I know.
I'm eating my dinner at the moment, so I won't. You don't want to see me with my dinner. It's not a good look. Ordinarily, I would, but I do think it's. I always find it a little bit disrespectful when people come onto these things and they don't put their cameras on. But that's the reason why I'm not on. But I've loved this discussion. Was looking forward to it, and have made it my business to make sure that I wanted to hear what was being said. And thank you, panelists. I think you've given some amazing insight, and having Bernie, I don't know you, but I am familiar with Tracey, and I'm also very familiar with Sharifah as well, and ladies, you have kind of stepped up to the plate as which is why I was made sure I was here, but also the fact that you are both talking about from slightly different perspectives, but actually saying the same thing about the different approaches, especially in the run-up and during the pandemic, and how we felt this was a bit of a sea change moment, and there was an opportunity for some real innovation, and it's gone by, and it's such a shame. And as I was writing in the chat just about the whole thing about compliance and competitiveness and the lack of time and the lack of creativity, and I do feel like the government really just doesn't care. They don't mind. They're not worried. Education's always been that way anyway, where we are able to use it to whatever ends the government will want to ensure re-election. So it's I feel sad and tired and jaded when I say that, but that's the truth. But so I just think really I don't even know if I'm adding anything. I think the time has to come to where we can try and break out and do something different. We need to, and we could do it ourselves as a profession. But while there will always be that nature of, I can't do that because, and I love Sharifah's spirit and thinking, I'm only going to give the kids one run through and then they're going to do their SATs. Damn right. That's it. It's not we're not exam monsters here. We're people. We want our children to have amazing lives, and they won't give a monkeys about their bloody SATs results when they're 18, will they? No one's going to be quoting it. So it just makes me sad that we sit there spending a lot of our time getting these kids to kind of be cookie cutter children having amazing results, which of course I know does impact with regards to funding and stuff. It's a complex issue, but it's just so sad that we're kind of falling into that trap, and we can do it ourselves, I believe, in what Tracey said. And I think Bernie is absolutely right when we look to see about the goodwill that's just slowly ebbing away. And if we're not careful, we won't have good teachers, and we will definitely not have enough head teachers. And goodness knows what the alternative is.
Thank you, Audrey. That was, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They don't really care. We've got local elections coming up. I haven't seen any election campaign that mentions education. So other things, but not education. Just my observation. Maybe it's different where you are. Maryse, you had your hand up. It's really nice to see you here this evening.
Hello again. It's been a really good discussion, and I've loved listening to everybody. And I definitely, a lot of things that people have said really chime with me and how I feel. I used to be leadership, and I stepped back into classroom teaching because, you know, I'm a single parent, and it's the only way that I can manage. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to step up again. But the point I wanted to pick up on is I mentioned it in the chat, the idea that we're being pressed from all angles. We need bums on seats to be able to come anywhere close to funding our education in our schools. We need that. And to get bums on seats, I mean, I live in South London, so we've got loads of schools in the area, and we're competing for children. And that's the reality, and it's very, very difficult. Ofsted is a major part in that. And I can't remember, was it Sharifah who mentioned about being a one-form entry school? All of that comes into it as well. But I wanted to pick up on culture in terms of keeping people in the profession. And it's not a solution, it's just a reflection that we definitely need to find our tribes, and we need to find the people that resonate with us. And I love the idea of that sharing good practice and so on. And being vocal about it, because it feels very much the press pick up on the social mobility czar. Tom Bennett has a loud voice that's listened to, but it's about getting our networks. And so I guess it's a question, if people know networks that we can be part of, that we can celebrate, that we can share the good work that they're doing. If you could give a shout out, and then we can be part of that celebration to get those voices being heard, and to say, right, this is how we want to do it. It can work. This is what we're doing. Because it's a very lonely job, headship. I mean, I only got to deputy head, but it's a very lonely job, and we need those people around us. So anything that we can share, let us know, and we can start being part of that culture to move it in that direction.
Thank you. I don't know if you know this, Maryse, but that's the very reason why I set up Above and Beyond, because I was very frustrated about the fact that there is no place where we celebrate each other. There is no place where we can collaborate and be together and acknowledge each other and share and ask for help without feeling ashamed. Because at the moment, when you ask for help, we seem to be failing, and nobody wants to be seen to be failing, because we're in a highly competitive, we've been made to compete about things we shouldn't be competing about. We should just be sharing, like Tracey said, just share what we've got. So it's early days on the platform, but I'm hoping that this will be a space where people can come along and open-heartedly share and celebrate and support, and allow themselves to feel vulnerable without feeling judged, basically, because we all go through good times and bad times, don't we?
Can I say something that just picking on what Marie said, Alison? And it's such a good point, because it is threaded through all the things that we talked about as well, about bums on seats. I know it sounds terrible at bums on seats, but it is key to funding for every school, no matter how big or small. The smaller the school, actually, the more bums on seats you need. I know, because that's exactly part of this. Part of my head now is always thinking about that, and it shouldn't be, because it's all then about funding. You know, it shouldn't be, but we are in competition then with our local schools for exactly that. And that's where Ofsted does come in, because then judgment is key. Because when you do have 5 local schools and everyone is competing for bottoms on seats because of that crucial funding as well, so now you have to play the game. It becomes a game. It has to, isn't it? But how do you stand strong as schools, as leaders, as teachers? Because I think there's one of the reasons why the increase in workload we talked about is because of this high stakes accountability system is also driven by Ofsted, because Ofsted in its spiel, and I know that some new messages are coming out, they are a force for good. The word force for good. I know, but I can see Bernie laughing. Really? Why use such a word? You know, because if you really are a force for good, you would be supporting schools. Parents do need to know that some schools need to improve, but what exactly is it they need to improve on? And improvement can only happen over time. Improvement can only happen when you know about that. I'd rather have a supportive system and supportive culture that supports all schools to be the best that they can be. There's a quota system in Ofsted as well. 25% of schools will be downgraded. You know, we hear this. So then you start thinking, well, I'd be one of those 25% of schools. What is the implication for my school and for me and for the children and for the teachers and for the funding? And at that middle structure, the people who be doing the work to empower the children to become better are those teachers that we talk about this evening. So Maurice, thank you for that point. Agree.
Thank you. Tracey, you've raised your hand.
Oops. Moment where I can't unmute. Just want to pick up, and I know sort of the bums on seats debate, but we're not all the same. In the same way that we don't want echo chambers on Twitter is the same way that we don't necessarily want all schools to be exactly the same. Bernie was talking about his daughter going through 6 heads in 5 years. Each one of those heads come in with a new vision, a new drive, a new direction. What I think we need in order to get bums on seats is be true to yourself, because as a head, I can't run the school for the way the governors or the trustees want me to. I can only do the job what's right for me. And by being able to sell what I do, I believe I can encourage those who think like me to also want to come and join us. And I always say to parents, if they ever turn up at our school and want to talk about Ofsted, I'm not here to talk about Ofsted. If Ofsted is how you're selecting a school, then I will tell you I'm the wrong school for you, because what I'm here for is this is our vision. You're signing up for our vision, or you're not. We need to work in partnership. So going back to some of that take control, I think it really comes from within, having that confidence as a head, with the governors that will allow you to be the head that you need to be in order to challenge that. And again, just hoping on the positive, because not every Ofsted inspection is dire, but those that do go well, when they're talking about some of the curriculum stories, it's those heads that have made the curriculum match what they want to do. So there comes a point, don't get me wrong, I don't agree with everything that the system is setting us up for, but there comes a point where I think it's like, this is what it is. How am I going to take the ownership of that? So make your school yours, Sharifah. Your school must be magical. That's all I've got to say. Because you're a head with passion who's there for the right money. And I think Maurice said it earlier, we're not in this for money because none of us are getting paid that well. So there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really, really important. Thank you for saying that. Bernie, you had your hand.
I was actually going to say something about money, but I kind of took my hand down because you were being really, really positive. And I didn't want to kind of dampen that fire any, but there is a cynical part of me onto what Maurice was saying, and what you've just said about money and, you know, getting bums on seats. If we don't value teachers that have been a long time in the profession, if they're forced to leave, then academies can take on cheaper teachers. Is that me being too cynical to save money so they've got more money for other things? I think it might be me being a bit too cynical, but I think that if you make headship very difficult, or deputy headship or SLTs very difficult, they're going to leave. I'm being far too cynical. Forget what I've just said.
I think that there is something to be considered. So certainly looking at the academy model, where you've got heads of school who are paid significantly less than a head teacher. They've got economy of scale. I mean, yes, education has become politicized, and we are in a government that is heavily invested in doing things for profit, and the way in which profit is measured is very crude, and it serves a small, a small few really gain from it at the cost of the majority. So I want to say you're wrong, because I want us to believe that education is truly about the betterment of every single child and truly valuing every teacher and every school leader and every member of the support staff. But the reality is that we become pawns in a system that's not always.
Yeah, and I think anything that can be created into a culture war at the moment is being done so. And I think we're all kind of pawns in that, aren't we? And, you know, if we react to something, then we're focusing on this. And then there's loads of other stuff going through the back door, like the policing bill that went through today that limits people's right to protest from a, you know, talking about the kind of British values, talking about the Nolan principles, talking about our right to free speech. Yeah, but not you lot. No, you can't say stuff, but we can. You know, and I think there's so much division going on. It's really difficult to maintain focus, which is why what both Tracey and Sharifah have said about managing your own culture is so vital, and being that umbrella and being that person that says that actually this is how we're going to do it. Yeah, we do that, but this is why we're here. We want to make your young people as happy and content and motivated and enthusiastic about learning as we can. Then the Ofsted results will come in time. But now we want to make sure people are happy and safe and have lovely times here. And I think it's a real brave thing to do that, but it's absolutely essential. And to have the governors on side to help you do that is more important than ever, I think.
Yeah, governance is definitely key here. And I just would like to remind ourselves that good leadership is about building communities, not breaking communities apart. It's about building your staff, not breaking them to illness. And of course, we need to remember that morale is extremely low in the profession at the moment. And low morale leads to depression, it leads to heart disease, it leads to other serious illnesses. So we do have a moral responsibility to do something about the morale that is being faced in our schools and come together to try and be whole again and celebratory again, because I know that despite the gloom that we've discussed today, you can walk into any school and there is incredible things going on, you know, just amazing things. A head teacher on Monday tweeted out that he'd not slept the night before and he was just having a really terrible time. There's nothing worse than going back to school. And I sort of said to him, well, I really hope that one child who makes you laugh, you meet that child early on. And he came back and sort of said, actually, there are about 715 children who are going to do that today. And then you could feel the joy. And that's why he was there. Because yes, there were reasons why he didn't sleep well the night before. And he's going to have, every day is going to come with challenges. It's going to be really, really difficult. But they are going, any school, you walk into any school and there's magic going on. And that's what we need to hold on to. We need to keep it. We need to bottle it. We need to celebrate it. We need to share it. And remind, and hopefully then we'll keep having the amazing teachers, the people with passion who want to teach from the soul. They'll keep coming in and wanting to be in our schools and making them the magical places that I know everybody in this group is doing. Okay, I think it's probably time for us to say goodnight to each other. But it's been a really, really wonderful discussion. And I'm so grateful that you all took the time out to come and join us today. And I just want to end by saying an extra special. I want to say thank you to Tess, who is the community manager, for facilitating today. And huge gratitude to Sharifah, to Bernie, and to Tracey for being incredible panelists. So good night and thank you, everyone.